The last page has been turned on my most recent read, and I'm currently enjoying a perfectly brewed cup of tea. It's needed, it is really cold. My flat actually got down to 2 degrees this morning. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but we are even further into December and closer to the beginning of 2023. I have opened a few more doors on my advent calendar, and we're now starting the wonderful Christmas close down project at the office. We're another week closer to the end of the year, and for the first time in probably a decade, I am actually relatively organised. All my presents are ready to be wrapped. Well, they will be by the time you hear this, and the work Christmas party has already taken place. I am pleased to say that I escaped hangover free and with no embarrassing tales to share. You may feel disappointed about that, but I really am not. Right now, I'm ready to tell you all about the book I've just finished. So here I am with a guest, no spoilers, opinion-filled and ready to roll. All of which means it's time for the latest episode of Being Bookish. I'm your host Ray, self-confessed bookworm, introvert, hermit, long-term depression sufferer and ex-coffee addict. Join me on my journey through my ever-growing to-be-read pile and enjoy the latest of my 100% spoiler-free book reviews. This week I have a guest with me, Lorraine, and we're going to be talking about the wonderful Stephen King short story from 1982, The Body, which you may know better as the film Stand By Me. So light a few candles or perhaps just switch on that reading lamp, because a bit of atmosphere is always a wonderful accompaniment to a reading session, and to be fair, in the winter months it's kind of necessary if you want to read the word on the page. Get yourself a cup of something hot or a glass of something chilled, depending entirely on when you're listening and your preference, of course. And let's get started. And I'm here, I've actually got a guest this week, and we're talking about a book that I was going to be talking about last month as part of my book to film adaptation series that never quite got off the ground. Wonder why that was. Anyway, I'm here with Lorraine, who you may well recognize from the fantastic horror and true crime podcast Once Upon a Nightmare, though it is on an unending currently hiatus. So hi Lorraine, thank you for coming
Hello.
on.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, it's been God, I don't think I've recorded since end of August. An episode went out in beginning of September. So yeah, it's been a while. Hopefully I remember how to speak the words from
That
my
is a
mouth.
good thing. As we were just working out, it's been a while. Lorraine is a regular guest. We're always talking film, and I get her to read a few books here and there
Mhm.
because I like encouraging people to read, as you know. And we talked about another Stephen King book, Misery.
I think I'm the official Stephen King person or horror person. I'll just come on and do the horror stuff.
Well, we did Firestarter before we did this.
Oh yeah.
So it is very much a Stephen King thing, though this one is very different from everything
Mm,
else that we've done by him.
yeah, I agree.
So we are talking The Body, which was actually part of his anthology Different Seasons.
Mhm.
And you may well not recognize the title, but you will recognize the story if you've seen the 1986 film Stand By Me, which is a very, very loyal adaptation.
Yes. Yes. That the whole way through, I was literally just like picturing scenes with the characters from the film. So yeah, because I did it audible, which is how I read books because I can't sit down. And I can physically sit down, I just don't have the patience for it. Um
That's
so
comforting to know.
yeah, so but yeah, it's weird listening to it and it's not being their voices, you know? But it's
Yeah,
very loyal. Very the few changes here and there, but in general it's very loyal.
it is. It's one of those books that I'd say It is a small it's a very, very thin book. I actually read the book this morning. It's currently 11:50 as we're recording, and I started reading the book at 9 o'clock.
Oh, shut up.
So that gives an indication. It's only I've got it right in front of me, and it is only just 198 pages in length. So it's a
Oh,
very, very thin book. It's reminiscent really of early Mills and Boon in length, but it has far better quality.
yeah. Yeah, I'd say that.
That said, a lot of good authors came from Mills and Boon.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, they did. Nora Roberts, P.G. Woodhouse, to name but two. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about the body, and I will just read the blurb on the back of the book, just so you get an idea of what it's about. We'd all listened to the Ray Brower story. He was a kid our age. The small town of Castle Rock is tuning in to the news of a young boy who has gone missing from a nearby town. Gordie Lachance and his three friends set off along the railway tracks on a quest, determined to become famous by officially finding the boy's body. But their journey becomes a rite of passage, and as they cross the railway trestle and the tracks begin to hum, the boys encounter an intimation of their own mortality. An iconic exploration of friendship, loneliness, and adventure adapted into the classic 1986 film Stand By Me. The Body is an unforgettable coming of age story by master chronicler of small town adolescence and universal experience, Stephen King. Would you agree with that summary?
Yes.
No
End
more?
of. Yeah.
End of.
Yeah. No, I think it's I think the thing for me with this, apart from the very end, which obviously I'm not going to say because it's slightly different to the movie,
Yeah.
is which I didn't realize because I'd never read or listened to the book before. So I didn't realize that they were going to do I didn't realize that ending. Um it's not because up until then, I was kind of like, you can't really, because you do spoiler-free episodes. I was like, you
I
can't really
do indeed.
spoil this one. You know what I
It's
mean?
quite difficult because it is such a short book.
But they kind of tell you at the beginning what they're doing. Like, do you know what I mean? So they tell you straight away, we're off to find,
Yeah.
Ray. And then it's just basically a story, which, in a sense is quite predictable of how these boys are going to carry on. So while I really, really enjoyed it, I'll be honest with you. Um, it wasn't. It wouldn't have been, even if I'd never seen the film. I wouldn't have been shocked by anything apart from the ending.
But at the same time, if you'd not seen the film and you'd seen the title of the book and seen the author, would you have expected this kind of story?
No, I would have expected um horror, and this wasn't. Like, do you know what I mean? So I would have expected it to be scary where it wasn't. There were parts of it with um like when they meet the older gang, you knew it wasn't going to be very pleasant, but it wasn't, there was nothing, it was just more of like a coming of age, like it says, book.
Yeah,
And
it is a story of growing up and growing older. And what I find really sad about the story is that none of them have had an easy childhood. But to put it in perspective, this is based during the very early 1960s.
mm,
And it is the main character, Gordo,
mm,
looking back on this particular event during that summer.
yeah. Yeah. No, I find that's one thing listening to, because I haven't I mean, I remember the film, but I haven't seen it for quite a while. And as I was listening to the book, I was like, this is so depressing. It's so sad. These poor kids, the way they get treated. I mean, especially, like, not that Teddy deserves what he got, but Teddy and Vern are kind of just like the annoying ones that you don't really, you know, care about as much. They're just, to me,
Yeah.
they were just very irritating. But the relationship between Chris and Gordy was, you really felt with them. I kind of felt like I connected with them a lot more than the other two. And it felt like there was a massive age gap between them. Not that they were all around the same
It
age. I know
felt
Vern.
it did feel like Chris and Gordo
Yeah,
they'd got a far more, mature friendship,
yeah.
and in a way, as you said, Teddy had a far more depressing upbringing. I mean,
Mm.
the abuse that he was put through by
Oh.
his dad was horrific.
Mm.
His essentially, he was when he was 8 years old, his father pressed his ears against a hot plate
Yeah,
and deformed them to the point where he had severe hearing difficulties, and he also had vision problems and everything else connected to this trauma. And his father was, um, what we term today as PTSD.
mm,
He'd fought in World War II and he was suffering from severe PTSD.
yeah. I I think as well what I find really sad about it all was none of them seemed to have anyone like a father figure or a role model or someone to look up to. I did feel like Chris and Gordy were kind of each other's role
Yeah,
model, but with the others, like, yeah, their dads either ignored them or beat them or were drunks, or their older siblings, like obviously one had died and the other was just they were just bullies. And then at school they were kind of classed as mainly the trouble kids, so it's like they didn't have anyone ever to like turn to. And I thought that was really sad because like they're so young. Like what are they gonna turn into when they've got no one to kind of lead the way, so to speak?
and the funny thing is I actually did some research about this morning, and it turns out that apart from going on the hunt for the body,
Yeah.
this was semi-autobiographical,
Oh, okay.
which is obviously putting Stephen King in the role of Gordy.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the stories the way through, he's publishing short stories and we're getting
Yeah.
them as inserted tales within the book.
Yeah.
So there's story within a story on several occasions. And I have to say, the one story that always sticks in my head because it has so many similarities to a specific scene in The Witches of Eastwick
Mm.
is the tale at the eating competition.
I love that scene. I thought and it, to be honest with you, because obviously I've seen it in the film, but it comes across really well in the actual book as well.
And
Like
I
you
like
can
the
really.
fact that the boys are, "What happens next? What happens
Yeah.
next?"
Yeah, they're really, sorry for coughing so much, by the way, this cold just won't seem to shift. Um, yeah, they just, yeah, I like that because you're doing the same thing. Like you're sitting there going, "And what?" And the weird thing was, even though I knew what happened, I
Yeah.
found myself going, "And what happened then? And what happened then?" So yeah, I thought I really because they did another story in it about a Chico. Was there someone called
Yes.
Chico? Yeah, I can't remember any of that because I switched off to it. I'm not very good at stories within stories. I find it really hard to stay focused because I'm invested in what's going on with the main characters, and then they
Yeah.
bring in this side bit, and I'm like, "What?" Because they did it with Misery as well. So when they do those things, I kind of switch off for that bit. So all I can tell you about that bit is there was someone called Chico. I
I think
literally
the
cannot remember another thing about it.
I think the biggest issue with that story with the I have actually highlighted that particular page those pages, but the issue with that story is that it doesn't feel attached to the main book, whereas
Mm.
the other story, it does because they're all it's called Stud City. The original one is Stud City by Gordon Lachance, originally published in Greenspun Quarterly, fall 1970.
Okay.
That's the title. But the other one, the tale with the revenge,
Yeah, that
is him.
fits.
It
Yeah.
fits because it is the sort of story that a child would tell around a campfire.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Oh,
thought
look,
that.
they took the mick, and then everybody was really sick, and it was so visual.
Yeah.
But the first story was about an adult in an adult situation,
Yeah.
and we knew that the children weren't. They were
Yeah.
actually they were in an adult situation almost, but not the the situation that Chico's in, where he's in a room with a woman and they've just had sex.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the Lardass one is, it sounds like something that could happen, but also a fun story that you make up to tell your friends. Do
Yeah.
you know
Oh,
that way?
absolutely.
At that age, it's very fitting for that age, to be like for a 12-year-old, like when you're hearing it from like a 12-year-old type thing telling the story, it's like I wouldn't come up with that at my
Yeah.
age, but at
He
12 I
ate so
might.
much he threw up and then everyone else
Yeah.
threw up. That is a kid's story. It's kind of like, "Ah, and that's what happened. Oh, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. That's revenge." Whereas the other story didn't fit with the narrative that we were reading,
No. And
and
plus,
that is possibly why it wasn't so memorable.
yeah, that's a fair point. And also I think plus with Lardass, as they like to call him, you're rooting for him as well. I feel like he was someone to root for because he was so teased and stuff like that. And I thought, what a great way to get everyone back who's kind of because they bullied him, didn't they? Because of his weight and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Because even when in the film, when he's like walking up on the stage, they call him Lardass, and then they go, "Oh, sorry," then call him his real name. Like, do you know what I mean? Um, but yeah, I liked that story. I thought it was a good little one to put in there.
That's the thing, every single character, as we've already said, had their traumatic past.
Mm,
And with Gordie, it was the fact that his older brother Dennis, who he admitted to admiring, though there was after he'd passed away, there were elements of jealousy because he was almost the forgotten boy.
yeah,
Well, yeah, which was really sad. His parents had tried so hard to have him, and then all of a sudden it's like he doesn't exist any longer. He may as well not be there, and that's how he feels. But his brother Dennis was killed in a car accident after he joined the army.
yeah, yeah.
So he's left with that trauma, and people use it to tease him, which is really cruel.
Yeah, that's one thing about this. They're brutal in it.
Yeah,
Like when they tease, like it's not like not that this is acceptable, but it's not like making fun of someone's hair or someone's weight or something like that. It's like going for the jugular. It's like
yeah. I
we're
mean, with Teddy, "Oh, your dad's mental."
yeah, and he was in the war,
Yeah, but
I
he's
mean his
also now in a mental
yeah.
institute because he needs help.
Exactly, yeah, and I mean, what his dad did to him was awful and stuff, but yeah, there's no compassion, from anyone in even with Teddy and Vern, there's no compassion because I think especially, like, Teddy almost seems like he's already gone, like his
Yeah,
dad, he's already gone. Vern is just like it's like Vern's an 8-year-old. He just hasn't a clue what's going on, whereas Chris and Gordie, they seem like a lot more mature, like they've got compassion, for what's going on, for the body, for each other, but nobody else seems to have an ounce of compassion for anyone.
yeah. It's almost as though looking back on it, Gordie's adult perspective is reading the, "Wow, they were a bunch of jerks."
Yeah,
They
yeah,
really were. I mean, they were horrific. The trauma that is inflicted upon them by their parents, by the town bullies who aren't even their own age. That's the thing that really got me, was the town bullies were friends of Vern's older brother, for
yeah,
starters, and they were much older than the kids they were bullying. They were old enough to drive a car, so they were at least 16, if
yeah,
not older, and they were picking on 12, 13-year-old boys and
yeah.
getting their kicks out of it.
Yeah, I find that very strange, the age of the older ones going for the younger ones because, they were very small. All 4 boys were very small, and I
Yeah,
wouldn't mind, like, Vern and Chris's brother were there as well, weren't they?
yeah.
So, like, they were related to them, and they were just like, the I mean, you shouldn't go around bullying people anyway and hitting people anyway, but there's just something about when you do it to somebody that you know that you can win, that you can beat them up. It's like, you wimp, you absolute wimp. Because I tell you one thing, if Chris was big for his age and he was like 6'5" and built like the Rock, they wouldn't have gone near him. Like,
No,
do you know
but
what I
they
mean?
that's the thing though, the tides do turn, because
Mm,
when they're all actually at the location where where the body is,
Mm.
Chris has a gun,
Yeah.
and the tides turn because you can see the fear on the page, and I'm no doubt you could hear it
Yeah. Yeah.
because Ace, the lead bully, who in the film's actually played by Kiefer Sutherland, which
Yeah.
always sticks in my head. He's always the bully.
Yeah, he was in that film, he stayed away from them all because he wanted and he was horrible to them apparently on set on purpose, not because he wanted to be, because that's the only way he could kind of be because he was horrible in it. Like,
He
he wasn't
really
a
Yeah,
nice
but
character
his
at all.
character in the book,
Yeah.
he doesn't it's quite strange. Because he's only mentioned in passing in
Mm.
the beginning of the book, when you finally meet him as a character, he
Yeah.
has so much more impact,
Mm.
and you can tell the way that I mean, Chris is quite unsteady with this gun, but he took it from his father, who is also an incredible, violent, alcoholic bully.
Yeah.
He took the gun from his father and he's waving it around. And he actually says to Ace, "Where do you want the bullet? I'll give you your choice. Do you want it in your
Yeah.
arm?" And that is the point. The tide turns and the bullies are scared of the people, of their victims.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they're a bunch of cowards who they, like I said, they know they're stronger, physically stronger, and they know that they can beat them. But when actual, like, real danger is in front of them, like someone with a gun, it just shows they're just cowards. And I'm not saying that, of course, if someone comes at you with a gun, you move, you're not going to argue with them because,
No.
you don't stand much of a chance. But the switch from, "We're not scared of you, we're basically gonna beat you," to, "Oh, no, they've got a gun," and they just completely back off. It just shows it's all a front at the end of the day,
Yeah, I think
you know?
this is the culmination of Chris's bullying by his father, his
Yeah,
brother, and everybody else. All of this culminates in the "I'll shoot you."
yeah,
And Gordy says in the text, it's not the fact that he's got the gun that scares them. It's the tone of voice that he uses when he says, "I will shoot you,"
yeah. No,
because he's reached his limit.
yeah, I suppose when you grow up, it's a shame that at such a young age you feel like you've reached your limit. But like like you say, you got his brother that bullies him, you got his dad that bullies him, you got his brother's friends that bully him, you got the school that thinks he's nothing. Like, you probably think to yourself, well, what have I got to lose? And with
Exactly.
Chris, I felt Chris was kind of like he was quite different in the sense that despite the fact that he'd grown up in that environment and he had the brother he did and he got treated the way he did, I always kind of felt like he was one that could get out. That way you kind of feel like actually he might break the chain where he doesn't turn out to be a drunk who goes around beating up 12-year-old kids, this type of thing. I felt
Yeah,
like he had, you know, a chance
he had
because of
potential.
him, because of him,
Yeah.
you know?
He was determined that he wasn't going to be like his dad and
Yeah.
his brother, but a lot of the things that he'd done leading up to that point had made everybody else think that he was going to turn out like his dad and his brother
Well,
because
guilty by association.
yeah, but he also skipped school
Yeah.
and he didn't pay attention in class when he did show up. So there were certain elements of his character that were almost predetermined
Mm.
until that summer. And then something clicked, and all of a sudden, he was no longer that person and he didn't want to be that person,
No. No.
which gave him hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, the other 2, I was just like, that they were just irritating characters, to be honest with you. But with Gordy and Chris, you actually felt that something was there. They had some substance to them, like, there's something going on upstairs. Whereas the other 2 were just, you know, like Teddy didn't stand a chance. What
No,
Vern might have just, got with Vern, you think, oh, he's just gonna go on, might have a couple of kids and get a job and 9 to 5 type thing. But with Teddy, I kind of you always felt like he had no control over his emotions whatsoever. And with him, you felt like he's probably gonna end up in prison or um so with Teddy, like I felt like with him, he was going to end up like either in prison or as a drunk because he wanted to be in the army, but obviously with his ear and his
Vision.
eyesight, there wasn't a chance. But with him, you just like I would have been gobsmacked if he had, if he was someone that would have turned his life around. Whereas with Chris and Gordie, you feel like that's going to happen. They're going to become something. But
Chris, that's the thing. I think that Chris wanted to get out of
yeah,
Castle Rock. Gordie wanted to get out from under the oppressive thumb of his parents, who,
mm.
despite the fact they didn't really pay much attention to him, were all too keen to say, "You were a miracle baby and we tried really hard for you, so you owe us this."
Yeah, they did because I remember there's one bit in it where they say how his parents never hit him, and but the way they were with him, sometimes that almost made it worse because there was like nothing. Not that obviously he wanted to be hit, but there was just nothing. He was just like in their eyes, I felt like he was just somebody that walked around the house. And because there's this one bit where I think he says, yeah, he goes back after the body's been found and everything, and he says to his mom, like his mom's not up, and then she comes down, she's like, morning, and then just like straight away she's on about Dennis again.
He's a ghost in his own home.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, it's very I don't know, it's just very sad. The whole thing was just very sad, you know?
That's the thing. I think this sort of story was incredibly common from King at that in that particular
Mm,
period, because this is also the same book that produced The Shawshank Redemption,
yeah. Yeah, because they
which,
mention it in it, don't they, Shawshank?
yeah, they do mention
Yeah.
Shawshank as, "Oh, you're gonna end up in Shawshank, the
Mm.
next town over." And it is very I think there is something about King's writing in this time period that I absolutely love, because
Yeah,
it's far more emotional.
yeah. It's kind of when you listen to books kind of based in this time or you watch films based in this time, why did people have kids? Like, is it they just got pregnant or they were planned? Because it just comes the kids kind of come across a lot of the time like they've had them and then it's like, "Oh god, the kids are here." Like, but they keep having more. I don't know, they've just I always get this sense.
Well, it was a time before contraception to start with,
No, it's true, but now when like I know there's still now, but people nowadays seem to be obviously, yeah, because you've got contraception, all this kind of stuff. But people nowadays seem to be more, I'm going to have kids, I'm not going to have kids. Yeah,
yeah,
we people get caught out, but it feels very much more a decision
intentional.
that's made, that way, either way. Whereas back then, yeah, granted, it but there wasn't like there was even any love between the couples. So like it's not like they're at it like rabbits and that's why they get pregnant. But maybe it's just like of the time you get married, you have kids, but you see a lot of these things in this era and it's just like they just want the kids out the way all the time and go out and play with your friends and they never felt like there was any real love for a lot of the kids. And I mean if you've got any listeners that are of an age where they were kids in the 60s, they might be able to give some insight of to what it was like. But when you do watch or read something, it just feels like they just had kids because that's what you do, but they're not really fussed about them once they're born.
But I think
Like
it was that's the thing. It was, you think about it, he was born Gordy, if he was 12 in what, 1962.
yeah,
He'd have been born in 1950, 5
yeah,
years after the end of the war.
yeah,
Baby boomers era.
yeah,
So they were trying to, in a way, repopulate to replace the children that had died during the war.
yeah. I don't know. It just always seems like a really depressing time. And like I said, I mean, this is only going by films and stuff you read and stuff. And obviously people that were born in that time might have a different viewpoint. But
I mean, our parents were born during that time.
that's true. Yeah, my parents were born in 52 and 53. And
And
yeah, it's
my dad was
interesting.
born in 51 and 54. My parents, 51 and
Yeah, because I've
54.
heard stories like obviously from my parents and stuff. And like even like at school or at home, it just sounds like kids were just a pain. You know, don't get me wrong, I see
Yeah.
kids around and they can be a pain, but I feel it's different, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's very strange, and I think he really gets that across, but it's one of those things where I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm glad I wasn't a kid back then."
But then you also look at the trouble that Gordie's parents went through in order to have him, because
Yeah,
it
go
says
back
she had
10.
Dennis and then she had multiple miscarriages
Yeah,
in order to have trying to get pregnant with another child, and then when she was 42, she got pregnant with Gordo. I mean, Gordie, his parents are much older. His dad is in his 60s.
yeah, 'cause basically, I think when you obviously, when you have kids in the 50s, it would have been unheard of to have them in their 40s.
My grandmother was
Yeah.
42 when my dad was born.
Yeah, but it wasn't as common, like, as it
No,
is now. Because I remember when I was a teenager, I was 15, and I was friends with this girl and her parents, because my parents were, like, they had us, like, in their teens, basically, and I remember her parents were, like, in their 50s or something, and she was the same age as me, and I just couldn't honestly, my little teenage brain just couldn't get my head around the fact that her
I'm
parents were the
exact
same age as my grandparents,
I'm exactly the same
almost.
because I went to school with a girl whose mother has sadly passed away on Friday, and
Yeah,
her
oh.
mother was 82,
Yeah.
and she's a year old my friend is a year older than me, and her mum's 82 and my mum's only just 68. There's
Yeah,
14 years between them. I mean, the thing is, I think there is a similar age gap between Gordie and his older brother,
yeah.
as there is between my dad and his older brother. My dad was born when his older brother was 16.
Oh, so that is a big that's a big difference.
There is a big difference, but then I've also got a cousin who became an older sister at 16.
Yeah.
She was 16, her sister was 14, and I was 11 when my cousin Daniel was born.
Yeah, because there's one bit in it which I think was slightly different in the film. Well, that's the way it came across to me anyway. So he talks about his brother and there being the age difference and how kind of he didn't really know him loads. Like,
Yeah.
but in the film, I felt like they had a closer relationship than what was in the book.
Yeah, in the book, that's the
That's
thing,
the way it came across to me
yeah,
anyway.
they skim over a lot of the relationship because he says a lot of people would have resented or hated their older brother, but
Yeah.
I admired mine. I have fond memories. He used to take me places
Yeah.
and I liked it. So the relationship, I think the difference
Mm.
between the book and the film is something we will be talking about in something we are going to be announcing at a later date. But with the book, you have that moment of clarity with, oh, well, they were actually quite close, but it is a moment. It
Yeah.
is literally a paragraph.
Yeah.
His talk about his brother is very,
Yeah.
very limited, and it is more referring to the fact that he feels like a ghost. Whereas I think on screen, you can get things done far easier with flashbacks and fond memories than you can on paper.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, obviously, when you see it, it looks because like, there's one, but I think they're sat on a bed or something, and he puts a hat on him or a baseball cap or
Yeah.
something, doesn't he? And, um, yeah, they just looked more I kinda don't didn't feel like in the book that came across what I saw in the film. But then again, like you said, you're actually witnessing it, so,
And I think in the
you
book
know.
we are talking far more about the individual character's growth. And this is obviously Gordo. In
Yeah,
though they do have that flashback element in the film, and you do have a narrator that is older Gordie, in the book, it is far more, "Oh, I'm writing about my childhood." And you have that sense of him typing the words, and that's how it feels. It feels as though he's actually talking about this as he's
yeah.
typing it, and he's reminiscing fondly about friends he no longer has.
So, with regards to the ending, and you do spoiler free, I now because the whole way through, like I said, I was like, well, it's not really a spoiler kind of episode because you can't really spoil it. And then the ending is a little bit different, little teeny tiny bit different. Um, but I take it I'm not allowed to mention that.
No. I think the one of the main reasons I try and stay spoiler free, even I mean, I did a whodunit last week, and there were I
Mm.
think 6 characters were dead by the end of the book. And it was a
Oh,
cozy
right. Okay.
mystery, and 6 people were clobbered to
Oh,
death with hammers. And it was a cozy mystery, murder mystery, but I didn't reveal who done it, and there were several who done it throughout.
yeah.
And that's, for me, that's a massive spoiler, but I want to encourage people to read it. So with this one, though it's not a traditional spoiler, and I really don't think it is a traditional spoiler, it's still a spoiler
Mm.
because
No, I agree, because
it's kind of that
I'll be
shock at
honest
the
with you.
end.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, obviously I'm not going to say it, but because it's not that different, but it was different enough for me to kind of go, oh, like, do you know, because it was something
Yeah.
new, because I'd seen the film, I've seen the film loads of times and I knew how it ended. And then to get that kind of like little bit of a different ending that wasn't that different, but just enough to kind of give me something new. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think if you haven't um read the book or googled the book or listened, did an audible book, then I would recommend to do it, because that little bit at the end, if anything though, it makes it even just sadder. You're just
Yeah,
like,
it does.
oh.
It really does. I think
Yeah.
this entire book is one that is it's a it's a journey of self-discovery,
Hmm.
but it's also a coming of age book. And it's really at the end of it, you get that punch to the gut, I think is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, I really did. Like, I was really surprised, because I knew what was coming. Well, I thought I knew what was coming, and some of it did arrive, but when the next couple of bits did, I was like, oh God, like, the whole way through, I'm like, God, these poor kids, and then you get the ending, you're like, well, not just bloody great. Like, you
And
know what I
that
mean?
I think that was the way that he made it so profound. That's the thing that I think
Yeah.
Stephen King is always, oh, he's the king of horror, but he is severe. I think his abilities when it comes to coming of age, and the fact that so many of, especially in the 70s and 80s, so many of his books were about teenagers and young adults
Mm.
finding
Oh yeah.
discovering
Yeah.
themselves. I mean, you've got Carrie, you've got Firestarter, you've got Cujo, Silver Bullet,
It.
Christine, It, and then you've got different
Mm.
seasons with The Body, and you've got short stories like Apt Pupil. And though Apt Pupil
Pet
could
Cemetery, that
probably,
was quite
yeah,
young, wasn't it?
Pet Cemetery I think was a bit
Mm.
different. And then of course you've got The Shining, which again is a bit different because they
Yeah.
were very young
Yeah.
children, and that was more
Mm.
traumatizing. But he had this
Yeah.
reputation in the 70s and 80s, not so much of the horror, but the teenage horror. And then you get to the late 80s, 90s, and you've got Misery, and you've got 20 oh god, what, I can't even remember. It's the book with 11 22 63 or something. And you've got all those other books, Rose Madder and so on, and they are far more building on the more adult or the more grown-up characters. Whereas these
Yeah.
ones were far more focused on, I mean, especially The Body and Carrie with the teenage bullies. And it's almost
Yeah.
like he was
Yeah.
using it as catharsis. So if Stephen King, if this
Yeah, it'd
was
be
your life, I'm
interesting
really
to sit.
sorry.
Yeah, I was just about to say that'd be interesting to actually sit down and have a really open conversation with him about. I mean, maybe he has done interviews, but like a real truthful conversation about what his
Yeah.
childhood was like. Because yeah, parts of his childhood are like books like this and Carrie and all that kind of stuff. Then yeah, you kind of, did he get bullied a lot and all that kind of stuff? But
Well,
yeah.
that's the thing. As I we were talking about earlier, this he did an interview and he was asked the question about the body, and he said, apart from the search for the body, this was
Not that it's the same.
semi-autobiographical. So, were
Yeah.
these his friends? Were these the people he remembers? Was his family this traumatized? I'm going to need to do more digging personally.
Yeah. No, I think it'd be interesting. interesting to kind of look into him, and because I do watch a lot of his film, and this actually listening to this, it makes me want to kind of listen to more of his stuff.
You did
Because we've
say
done
this
a few
before with
now.
with Misery, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think he keeps you engaged. I will say that about him. Like apart from the little bit where like the Chico bit, I was fully engaged in this. So yeah, it definitely would make me go for another one. But not when I'm feeling down.
So in other words, Stephen King, not for when you're depressed.
Not for when you, especially this one. Jesus. Yeah, but I did enjoy it. I was glad that we chose this one.
We've
I
been
thought it was
talking
really, and
about doing this one for ages, to be
we
fair.
have been, yeah. And the ending, not knowing what I now know, it was a nice little. It was something new for something that's old. This book's what? When did he write this book? Did you say 82?
I think it was. The book's over the other side of the room.
Oh yeah. Sorry, we had a little bit of a trouble with the
Yeah,
recording, so Ray
there were
had
a
to
few
move.
technical difficulties. So if you notice a few repeated sentences, that is purely because my studio doesn't seem to like the internet. Shocker.
Yeah. But yeah, so to say it's that long, yeah, it was nice to have that little bit at the end. Gave me
Yeah.
something new.
That's
Because I saw Stand By Me back in the 80s. So, that's like nearly 40 years ago. 86 was the film. So
you've said you'd read other books by King or listen to other books. What was,
yeah.
because you did listen to it on Audible, what was it like? What was the actual recording like?
I liked the guy who did it. I think his name was Frank Muller. He did a really good job of it actually. I really enjoy the audio books, because like I do a lot of walking and I'm always up and about. They're really good for that. So I'd highly recommend them. Like if you're not a big reader like me, I do sit and read true crime and stuff like that. But if you're not I wish I could sit down and do it, but I just haven't got the patience, or I fall asleep really quickly. So like when you said I started the book at 9 o'clock and then we started recording this at like 11:30. And I'm like, I would have been asleep by 9:10. Like, I mean?
That's the thing though. I find it really difficult to listen to audiobooks. Really difficult because
it's good that
I'm the reverse of you. If I listen to audio, I'm more likely
yeah,
to fall asleep than if I read the book.
But it's good that they do that because I know like some people, not you, but I've seen some readers that can be quite snobby if you say you don't read a book, you listen to them, they you get this idiotic response.
Any way you're absorbing a
I know
book,
I
it
can't be
doesn't
dealing with
matter.
people like that. It's like, yeah, yawn.
It's been a massive
but
discussion on book forums for years. Is having an audio book classed as reading? And it's like, well, yes, because you are still absorbing the word. I think that's the way you can term it.
Can't sit down and they don't have, like, especially nowadays, with commutes or like people working from home, especially, and stuff like this. Whereas it's nice to have it on when you're doing things. And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how you get get the information, as long as you're getting it. Like, if
I
it's
mean,
by
think about it
listening
this way. If it weren't for the popularity of audiobooks, podcasts probably wouldn't stand a chance.
No, exactly.
Because
so
you're
I think,
absorbing information via spoken word.
But let's face it, people need something to argue about, don't they? So,
I think that is, I find it such a frustrating thing to argue about. I mean, personally, I cannot absorb the written word via audio. I find it really difficult, and I will fall asleep if I listen to an audio book. I've actually got an Audible subscription, no promo here, but I download radio plays because I listen to them as white noise when I'm asleep.
Yeah.
And I'll wake up. Probably I've listened to Good Omens. I've read the book several times anyway, and I have spoken about it with Chance on this show. But I've probably listened to the beginning and the end of it about 50 times. But never the middle.
Yeah.
Because I fall asleep.
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody says to me, here's the book, it's like, oh, great, there's an afternoon.
Yeah, no, I can't do that. I can't sit down. And I think if people say something to me about it, and I'm like, you're being rude. You're making fun of me because I don't have the ability to sit still and have ants in my pants.
Exactly. And the thing is, I don't think that that's a bad thing, because
No.
if you're listening to a book while you are watching, while you're on a walk, or you're
Yeah.
at a gym recital, or well, not gym recital,
Yeah.
a gym rehearsal with your kids,
Yeah.
or you are in the park and you're doing whatever, or you're sitting in your office and it's really, really quiet. It doesn't matter if you've got something accompanying it.
And think of the jobs. There's people
Yeah.
out there that get paid to read.
Oh, yeah. Plenty of
You
people
know?
that get paid to read.
Yeah.
And
So,
I
yeah.
don't begrudge them that at all. I'm jealous that they can actually do that. And also, I am kind of envious of those people that can listen to an audiobook and still remember it, because I can't do it. I need the word in front of
Yeah,
me.
I can with some, but I am very good at like taking stuff in like for an episode and then being like, you can get rid of that now, make room for some more information.
So overall, this book is one that you would recommend?
I'd highly recommend it. I think it's just a really great story. And you don't have to have seen the film, but I would recommend seeing the film as well because it's a great film. So yeah,
Would you recommend
overall.
seeing the film after reading the book? I mean, I have to be honest, I did see the film after reading the book, but then I've been a bookworm since the year dot. So
I personally would have preferred to have listened to this first, then had seen the film for this particular one. So I would, because I think the problem for me was I was the whole way through, I was, seeing River Phoenix, Will Wheaton, Kiefer Sutherland, Corey Feldman. It was all them. So I didn't get to, usually I am like that. I want to know what it's all about. I'm terrible for that because I've got no patience and I want to know what it's all about. And then I want to see the film and then I'll go listen to it. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense. But with this, I kind of wish that I had got to like use my imagination a bit and what did they look like and how did they sound? Whereas even though it was the voice of Frank Muller, when he was doing the bits of Chris and of Gordie and stuff, I was hearing Will Wheaton and River Phoenix, that. So
yeah,
I didn't get the chance to kind of, you know, make
create
up
them in
my
your
own
head.
mind. Yeah. So for this book, I personally wish I had heard it before I saw it.
And that's
So,
not necessarily a bad thing, to be fair.
No.
Well, because we are not revealing spoilers, it sounds really bad. This is cutting. We aren't going to reveal the end. We know we've already said they find the body, but to be honest, that is not the end of the book. And though the book is titled The Body, that's not really the purpose of the book either.
Very small part. Yeah.
It is an incredibly small part. It's more the journey to self-discovery and developing their friendships more than anything. So I'd give this book 2 thumbs up personally. I mean, this is probably the 6th time I've read it. And you can buy it as an independent book on its own, as you can all of the short stories by Stephen King. I'd recommend, to be honest, buying the whole book, different seasons, because it has some fantastic other stories in there, including The Shawshank Redemption.
I think actually I'm going to do The Shawshank as well.
I've never seen the film.
Oh,
I've never seen the film, but I've read the book multiple times.
The film is exceptional. It is a absolute one of the most amazing films I've ever seen. It's brilliant. It's so good. But that's the thing.
I mean, I'm not, though I like film, I'm not a film girl.
I think you'd enjoy it, but it's one that you sit down and watch, not while you're reading, not while you do. I'd sit and watch it because it deserves that. It deserves your attention. It's so good. Like, it's so good. It's such a good film. And the acting is exceptional. The acting is exceptional. The whole thing is just amazing.
I've met one of the cast.
Highly recommend it. Sorry?
I've met one of the cast of The Shawshank Redemption.
Which one?
Bill Sadler.
Oh, did you?
Yes. I've got photos of me looking like an absolute gormless idiot meeting him.
No, if you wanted like a film just one Sunday afternoon or something, sit down and watch. But watch it. Don't watch it while you're reading and all that kind of stuff. Just watch it because it deserves the attention. Such a good film.
I think I shocked you when I said that.
Well, I'd like you to watch it just because I'd be curious to see what you thought of it. Because this one thing, I've never heard one person say a negative thing about it. Not once. So I haven't.
The Shawshank Redemption's another short book, and it's not even called that, but it is a good book.
Yeah.
So now that you are currently on a break from podcasting, I know that people can still find you on social because you're doing some really interesting stuff at the moment. So tell us where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm not really doing much at the moment. So I'm not really. If you want to find me on social media, you can find me on Twitter as, I think I'm just Lorraine Purdon. Am I? I don't know.
I can't remember. I know I follow you, but I don't. It sounds awful. I don't look at the names.
Yeah.
I just look at the pictures and the posts that are coming up. But thank you ever so much for coming on and talking about this. I'm really pleased. We found another book by Stephen King that you enjoyed. But he does write some.
No,
I do want to read Fairy Tale though.
Oh yeah, isn't that quite a new one?
That's his new one that came out a few months ago. Yeah. It's had mixed reception.
Yeah.
Some people say fantastic beginning, the middle is really slow, and then the ending is incredible. And then other people are like, "Oh, this isn't a Stephen King I'm familiar with." But at the same time, neither was The Body.
Yeah.
So if you've read his newer stuff, maybe he's reverting back to the older stuff and the older style.
Yeah.
Which would be quite interesting to see a return to, because that's my favorite era of his writing.
Yeah. True.
It's the bigger book. It's quite a big book, but hey. And depending on who reads the audio, you might really enjoy it.
A day to read it.
Oh no, it'd probably take me a bit longer than that, but it is it's a hefty tome, though not as big as it, which is over 1,000 pages.
Yeah, that one's massive.
That is a massive book. But again, thank you ever so much for coming on and talking with me about this, because I think it's one of those books that you need to talk with someone about rather than two people about. It's an interesting one.
Certain films and books are like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely. I mean, there are certain books I could talk about till the cows come home on my own, but this one is one of those, I think, that has elements about it that you need to hear another perspective on.
Yeah. Cool.
So that is it. This was us talking The Body. Definitely go out and pick up a copy. It's in different seasons, the anthology, or you can buy it as a single version on its own. I would personally pick up different seasons, but I couldn't find a copy online at the time. So that's why I got a single version. I did look and they were out of stock everywhere. Really annoying.
All right. Okay.
And thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening and joining us. If you like what you hear, why not share it with your friends and family? And please post a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other podcatchers where you listen. You can follow me on Twitter at being_bookish and on Instagram at beingbookishpod. Or you can check out my website, beingbookish.co.uk. Wow, say that enough times and it's going to start tripping off the tongue much easier. Well, I've got a lot to get ready for next week and a new book is calling me. I've got more being delivered today, but don't tell anyone. So until next time, this is me saying farewell.